All set? Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and call what's today? July 2nd Government Operations Meeting to order. We have a quorum. Everyone is here. And we have a couple other legislators. Shauna and Mike Lane are here. Thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda? I don't believe we've received any comments from the public, unless Michelle or Katrina know otherwise.
I haven't.
Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
No,
I
Amanda.
haven't received everything.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let's do the minutes from our June 4th meeting. Can I have someone move that? Henry, seconded by Mike Sigler. Any questions or comments or changes? All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Dan Klein?
Yes.
Henry Granison?
Yes.
Mike Sigler?
Yes.
Rich John?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. Great, thank you. All right, we do have a resolution from ITS, appropriation from contingent fund terminal pay, ID 9394. Excuse me. Any questions or comments on that one? All right. Last call. Questions? Nothing? All right, let's go ahead and vote on that. Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Oh, I guess somebody has to move it. Nobody moved it.
I'll move it.
Okay, Mike moves it.
I'll
Second.
second.
Rich seconds it. Mike, you still a yes?
Yes.
Rich?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I'm also a yes. All right, great. Flying through things. I think Lisa is here to talk to us about some policies. So I guess why don't we go ahead and move them, and then Lisa, you can talk to us about them. Can I get a mover? Dan moves and Mike seconds. Excuse me. Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, so what we have here are two new policies, and they were ones that were on the agenda to create and add to the manual this year, and they were made even more important with COVID-19. So we actually had kind of a testing ground to learn about telework and about flexible work almost overnight. And so we learned from that experience, and what we wanted to do is formalize and tighten up what we've had in place over the last several months. So I don't know if people have specific questions I'd be happy to address.
Rich, go ahead.
Thanks. I did have one question. Why 165 miles? That was just interesting to me. My other one was in paragraph, let's see, B, the first one under 2 policy. The last line, should we reference Article F in there or Section F? Telework arrangements may be terminated at any time by either the employee or by their department head designee, because it does seem to be controlled by Section F. A couple pages past. So those were my 2 questions.
So I can answer the first question, and Drew popped on. That was a recommendation about telework because of once you start crossing state lines and or go to New York City, there are different tax arrangements that may fall into play if people are living either across, state lines or in New York City. So we were trying to account for that. Is that correct, Drew? Is that fair to say? Yeah.
You've got it. Thank you.
So that was an addition there. And Rich, what you were saying made sense, but I didn't get there in time in my copy to see. Could you reference again where in the policy you were pointing to?
Yeah, on page 2 of the policy packet, page 12, B at the very top, the last sentence of B, I would say in accordance with section F.
Change. In accordance with section F of the policy.
Yes.
Sure, that makes sense.
I don't know if it's section or article F, but whichever.
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay, I froze there for a minute, but I think I've caught up now. Are you done, Rich?
All done.
Okay, Henry?
Yes. So what's the issue that if you live in Pennsylvania and commute to county to work, that's fine. But if you live in Pennsylvania and want to work from your home in Pennsylvania, that's different?
Drew, could you speak to this?
Yes, this actually came out, as you're aware, we're moving to a Kronos time and attendance. And we were on a payroll training, and Kronos elaborated on a few of these issues that they're getting into. Where the employment is located is actually where the employee works. So that can create an employment nexus in either that state or, as we mentioned, the 165 miles in Manhattan. So the prime example was an employer in New Jersey had people live in Manhattan, which has an employer tax. Because they were working remotely, they were no longer considered employees working in New Jersey, earning wages in New Jersey. They're now working in Manhattan because they live in an apartment in Manhattan. So it really depends on where the majority of the person's work is taking place at. Does that answer it?
Yeah, so though, why don't we say that you have to work in New York State or not New York City? As
Yeah, I
opposed
think
to
that's what,
160
that's what we were trying to do, is keep it within New York State, yet avoid New York City. So I was struggling with the terminology around that.
Rich, did you have a comment on that?
I do. I believe that the increased tax rate is not just New York City, but it includes maybe Yonkers. And so you get into a complicated situation of naming specific municipalities. I like the miles. We might change it to 163 though, just to keep people guessing.
Because does that include people who are working in Buffalo?
Yes, it would cover all the rest of the state until you get to downstate.
It would cover
It gets down
Lake-
to Suffolk County, I think, is what
okay,
we
it covers
tried to
Lake
do.
it covers Lake Placid in theory.
I believe so. I'll double check that.
Oh, maybe I'll go work from Lake Placid.
Well, I'm just thinking that maybe somebody has to take care of a sick relative or something else like that. They would move to that area and still continue to work. And so that's what I'm thinking.
We understand there is some pending legislation at the federal level, which will give some time periods for this. But right now, there is no legislation that would exempt somebody for even like a 2-week period. So.
Okay. Also, I wanted to ask Lisa, is the ergo stuff just thrown in here because it's someplace, it needs to be someplace?
Yeah, it's kind of recommended because these are, these turn into people's official workstations. And so therefore, you know, providing them with guidance about it to curb the risk of workers' comp issues.
Okay. I just thought it was odd that
Yeah.
it was in the telework policy.
Yeah, that's, yes.
All right, you all set, Henry?
Yep, I'm all set.
Dan?
Thank you. So first of all, on the 165-mile question, I understand the point, and that's very interesting, but you could live in Pennsylvania and be a lot closer than 165 miles. It doesn't cover that scenario.
It's located in New York State
Okay.
and within 165 miles of Ithaca.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, so my real questions are, packet page 13, under procedure A, eligibility number 4, it says employees who have received formal disciplinary action within 1 year from the proposed telework arrangement start date are ineligible. My question was, any action? Is it, you know, no matter what happened to you, no matter why you received a disciplinary action, you cannot telework?
Yeah, as it's written now, yes, that it's kind of seen as a reward or something that's earned, and that if there was a disciplinary action, then it would make you ineligible. But,
Okay.
you know, after a year, you could, you know, without any further action, then you could be eligible once again.
Okay. I'm a little uncomfortable with that. I was thinking maybe if we reference section F2 there as a starting point, you know, the reason that you were disciplined, or, but I don't, honestly, I don't know what the full range of things that an employee can get disciplined for are. So I'm not pushing it. I just bringing up the question. My only other little one was in section 7 on that same page, it says PC a couple of times, and we should spell that out.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any other questions, Henry?
Yes, as I finally clicked the right button. And this is, and I don't want to be annoying about this, but I just checked, and Lake Placid is, by walking on Google Maps, 240 miles. Now by driving, it's 250 because you have to do the elbow through the Adirondacks. But by walking, it's still, I believe it's in excess of 165, but I assume that New York City would be closer, and so you have to basically exclude the Yonkers in New York. You have to exclude Lake Placid to get it within the distance.
So would it be more straightforward to say an employee's telework location must be located in New York State and not be a special taxation district, i.e. Yonkers, New York City?
That might solve the problem, but I don't know, Henry.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably not gonna get anybody to do this, but it just seems odd that you put this arbitrary line of where it's around. But it's probably not going to be a concern. I just want to raise it.
Okay, well, do folks like the terminology that Lisa just said of specifying not so much the miles from Ithaca, but the taxation aspect of it, Rich?
This seems entirely academic, and that anybody who's going to work here 3 days a week is not going to be commuting more than 100 miles in any event. So I don't care either way,
Okay.
even though I proposed 163, I know.
Okay, well then I'm gonna go ahead and say, Lisa, you can leave it as is unless Henry or Dan or somebody else severely objects. No. Okay.
Okay.
All right, 165 miles it is. Thank you. Or 163 if you want to play with it.
We'll keep it as is.
Okay. Anything else on the telework policy? All right, then let's go to the next one, which is related, which is on packet page 29, flexible work schedules. Anything else to say on this one, Lisa?
Now, just that I appreciate your timing on both of these because they've become increasingly important with COVID-19 and the need for employees to find creative ways to address childcare needs and other needs. So implementing both of these now, now that we no longer are making emergency leave available, is really helpful and important management tool and helpful to our employees as well. So this just allows them to, with their supervisor's input and approval, to work, non-traditional hours, compressed hours, flexible hours, et cetera, but formalizes the agreement.
Great. Well, thank you and your staff for working on this and putting it together. I mean, it's very thorough, and I think yeah, has a lot of great information to help administration. Any questions on this one? Henry, is your hand up again? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, Lisa, I was wondering, does the flexible work schedule also can apply to the telework? Because I know that when DSS had the telework, you had to work 9 to 5.
Yeah, so I guess it could. It really depends upon the.
It's not prohibited.
It's not prohibited. Yes, but and again, they work in parallel with each other. You saw probably a lot of similar language in both, so they're consistent in that way. But it does, depends on the needs and specifications of each department. So, if you are in a department and in a position where you say you provide coverage from 8:30 to 4:30, and that's one of your roles and responsibilities. If you are working from home, you would still be expected to provide that coverage, but your calls would roll over to your home number, that sort of thing. So, there's a lot of flexibility offered in implementing these just to make sure that the work gets done. So to answer your question, it kind of just depends on each situation, and you might be able to do both in combination.
Okay, because again, DSS had a clear prohibition against it. Whether or not you would need it between 9 and 5, you had to work those hours. I just wanted to check. Okay.
Right.
All right, Rich.
I just offer the same comment as I did with the other policy about connecting policy section B with procedure section F on termination.
You got that, Lisa? Or
Yes.
okay. Other questions or comments on this one? All right. Well, thank you again, Lisa, for these and for all of the policies you keep bringing to us. It's good to get through them. Let's go ahead and vote. Henry.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Rich,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
and I'm also yes. So that is unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lisa. All right. So moving on to the rules of the legislature discussion. I see Annie just jumped on. Good timing, Annie. So just to sort of recap, earlier this year, when Gio talked about our goals for the year, one of the things was to go through the rules of the legislature and see about doing revisions. So we kind of put that off during the COVID time, but now that, you know, things are kind of settled out and we can kind of work on some regular stuff, Dan and Rich and I started doing some serious editing, which the document needs. So our plan as of right now is to kind of take it in chunks, maybe like 4 big chunks, and go through as the 3 of us and do editing both on a document and in person if possible with physical distancing, and bring a revised draft back to this committee, which will then be taken to the full legislature for a vote, or a, you know, further discussion on whether the full legislature agrees with the changes that we've presented. So we've kind of gone through the first, I think the first 3 rules, which is primarily about meetings and quorum. And in your packets, you would have found the line edited version as well as a almost clean version, which still has typos. So I talked to Rich earlier today, and one way that we thought about going through this was to kind of walk through each section, and if you have the version in front of you that is the edited version with the red and blue markings, we can kind of say, okay, here's one section. Does anybody object to this change? You know, where we add the word "the." And if nobody objects, we'll just assume that change is added into the revision. There are topics that I sent the gentlemen of Geo, as I like to call them, because you are all gentlemen. Some basic, the bigger things that we really need to discuss as a committee, but then the full legislature needs to discuss. And I think some of those are obvious. They're bigger decisions that everyone needs to weigh in on. The smaller stuff, hopefully, folks won't have too many objections on. So, you know, we do have time today to talk about some of it, and if we don't feel like we're coming to a conclusion as a whole, we can certainly take it back to Rich and Dan and I, and we can go through another revision and bring that forward. We don't have to vote on this today or get through it today. This is not, there's no time limit on this process. You know, everyone is going to have a chance to say their thoughts. But I also don't want to spend the rest of my afternoon doing this. So some balance of discussion and letting things go. So with that said, any questions or comments about process? Dan and then Henry.
Yeah, I know that Martha sent an email earlier today, which I read through once. I don't know about other people. I have not yet mastered how to look at documents while I'm Zooming. So I would like to consider Martha's comments too. I just don't know exactly the best way to do it. I just wanted to mention.
Sure. I did look at them as well. I tried, she made comments on the clean copy, so she was kind of already looking past the commas and stuff that we had sort of already worked through. And I think I kind of tried to pull out the things that she had mentioned, but she is here. And I think as we go through, it might become clear, but I totally get you. Like I can't do a document separately on while I'm doing, I mean, I can, but my computer is really slow. So I totally get it. Henry and then Martha, if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I had nothing to talk about this time. I had something to talk about the content.
Okay. All right. Martha, did you want to say something about your email?
Yeah, thank you. And Dan, there's a way if you exit full screen on Zoom, then you can see your tabs below and you can click on different things. But now's not the best time to practice, but so I'm happy to kind of go through just the things that I commented on. And
Well, I think, why don't we go through the whole document, and if there's other stuff you want to add in, Martha, like everybody can kind of jump in and see. And if I don't capture what you've sent in your email, you can certainly jump in.
I mean, if for example, if you're like do the first paragraph and I have
Yeah.
not done the first paragraph and yeah, that sort of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Rich? Sure. Rich?
Yeah, the purpose of my call to Amanda earlier today was just what I would really like us not to do is to have 8 people trying to edit a document on Zoom that we can't all look at in the same room. So that's why I was suggesting maybe do 2 passes. The first time just to see if there's objection to language. And if there is, then we circle back the second time and talk about the things. But just controlling process so we're not having tremendous pain looking at this because we are not in a hurry.
Yeah.
That was my.
Yeah. That's great and fine. And definitely, you know, we'll just kind of take it as we go, and some parts will be easier than others. So anyway, jumping in. So I guess I would recommend, if you have the redlined copy in your packet, that might be a good place to start, and we can kind of go through and see how folks feel about some of these edits. So the first change is in the first sentence, and the organizational meeting will be fixed by resolution of the legislature duly adopted at least 1 month prior to the 8th day in January. Does anyone, the former language was during the prior month of December. I guess if you have an objection, just speak up. All right. Then we just pause sentences. The clerk of the Tompkins County Legislature, there's a few little small edits in that sentence. All right. At the end of that paragraph was something.
Wait, I have a couple of things too.
Sure.
Who talks about the member by mail, these 48 hours. I noticed in section P on special meetings, it shall mail or email or serve upon each member, notify personally by phone call 48 hours prior to such special meeting. I'd rather have that language than just just mail.
Okay.
Because we don't know when will they mail something. We get it there by 2 days beforehand, and so we say email or personally serve.
Okay, that works for me. Just sort of adopting that language to the first part.
Right.
Martha, did you have a comment on that?
on that notification, no, I was gonna go to the quadrennial.
Okay. Okay.
I couldn't hear what Henry was saying.
Yeah, you were breaking up a little bit, Henry, but so he was saying taking the language from the next page on special meetings, where it talks about the clerk notifying personally by phone or email, whereas this one doesn't, the very first part here, it does not mention email. So just transferring the language. Yeah, okay. Okay, so then, yeah, I guess as we go through, if there's edits like that that are not in here, speak up and we'll add them in. So at the last sentence, Martha had added not to, or suggested changing the quadrennial election to legislature, election of the legislature, which encompasses the group as a whole for that 4-year period, if I'm understanding correctly. Right, Martha?
It just said quadrennial. It seems like there must be feedback from Henry or something. Quadrennial could be any election. So
Right.
if we say legislature, then it's clear.
Okay.
Right, because if we change the terms of the legislature, it wouldn't be quadrennial anymore.
Right. Exactly.
So
Dan?
just, does it get rid of the word quadrennial, or does it say the quadrennial legislature election?
Yeah, no, I deleted legislature in what I sent out. I deleted quadrennial, substituted legislature.
I think maybe we should do both words, because what this doesn't cover is every single time a legislator gets elected. It's just the once every 4 years. Sometimes legislators are elected in between.
But I think there's the question of if we go to a 2-year term or a 1-year term or a 5-year term.
But that's not the rules at the moment. So I'm just saying, the point of this is saying it only happens once every 4 years. It doesn't happen every year. It doesn't happen every single time someone gets elected. It happens at the time
All
when
right,
we all get elected.
So I take your point, Dan, and I take your point, Martha. This might be one that we need to discuss. Like let's figure out the wording separately.
Okay.
Because I think you're making a good point, Dan, and but I don't necessarily want to, like, I don't know, try to figure out each line. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I will put a star next to that, as we need to figure out the wording. All right, next paragraph, there was no alterations. All right, so the next section, there was quite a few edits and moving things around and some questions. So a couple of things I'm just going to throw out there. There isn't a section that I've found anywhere in the rules that specifically defines what the duties of the chair are, or the vice chair, or the temporary chair. And when Dan and I sat down to look at this, we were kind of like, well, maybe we need to have something that it does sort of spell out what the vice chair is supposed to do, but it doesn't really spell out what the chair is supposed to do, or what the temporary chair is supposed to do or not do. So I see Jonathan maybe has something to say.
It does define the duties in the charter. If that,
Okay.
you know, I mean, obviously they could be added here too, but they are in the charter.
So maybe it should reference the charter and say, you know, look to section whatever of the charter to understand the duties of each role.
Right. I don't know if it says anything about the temporary chair, but it defines the role of the chair and says basically the vice chair acts in the absence of the chair.
Okay. Henry?
Yeah, I have an issue with the way it works now, that the vice chair does not take over the chair if the chair is missing. And I just wondered why. Oh no, sorry, next section. No, why? Oh, also the issue about the vice chair to election only after the chair's been elected.
Right. So that's Yeah, that's another thing that the group needs to decide as a whole. And the way we just, we put it in this way, we can discuss if it should be a different way. And sometimes, Henry, when you talk, you're kind of cutting out. So if you can speak.
Henry, I think it's when you look away, when you're not speaking directly into the microphone, it seems to blank
Okay.
out.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Jonathan says that those are defined in the charter. So that's another thing that our small committee should maybe go back and read that, and then we can either say reference the charter, or if it makes sense to put that in here, I guess we'll discuss that. Okay. Yeah, Martha.
I had my hand up. So we're still on the paragraph about at the organizational meeting, the clerk or deputy clerks. Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Somewhere it says after a chair is selected. So I had to change just the chair after a chair is elected.
Yeah, I think I saw that too, and I had changed it earlier, so I'm not sure why.
I did change that.
Yeah, we did change that. I'm not sure. I mean, yeah, but we got that for sure.
Okay, and then when you get to the last line, I had questions about that one.
Okay, we're at the beginning.
Okay.
So I think we added in the temporary chair shall be elected by the majority vote of the members present. We good with that? And then, so the next sentence, we kind of changed the wording a little bit. The temporary chair shall preside, and the next order of business shall be the election of chair. Okay, and then this was a sentence that we weren't exactly sure where it should go, but this goes back to what we were just talking about with the roles of each person. The temporary chair may preside for up to 30 days, after which time the position of chair shall be considered vacant. So it's just trying to clarify that they can serve for 30 days and no more than that. And then we added in the temporary chair is not empowered to make appointments without the approval of the majority of the legislature. Okay, great. So then this is the part Henry was bringing up, and it is something that we should discuss. After a chair is selected or elected, a vice chair of the legislature shall be elected. So I think that's an easy way to say that, and that means that the chair election has to come first. If folks feel differently, we can discuss that. Henry, did you want to say something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just thought this year the whole argument. Am I still breaking up?
Go ahead. You just talk. Yeah, just talk right to your microphone.
Okay, I just thought I didn't really, buy the argument about people who want to run for both offices, and I really think that if we don't have a vice chair, well, we could easily select a vice chair, possibly, then we should do that. And so that's the way I just feel about it. And so I don't know how many other people feel about it that way, but I certainly do.
Okay. Dan and then Martha.
So Henry, just to play out your idea a little bit, if we fail to elect a chair and then we proceed to elect a vice chair, as you're suggesting, what role does that vice chair play? Do they take over as temporary chair, or are they just the vice chair?
I assume they're just vice chair, but if the temporary chair is sick or something else, then what are you going to do?
Okay.
You have the vice chair take over because they're already installed. Because again, you already voted on a temporary chair, at least for 30 days. And there's also why wait? Why not have one of the leaders take over then? immediately?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And also, there was another part, I think on the next page, about until a new vice chair is elected, the previous vice chair shall continue to serve. So that kind of goes in with it, like when does the previous vice chair stop? And yeah, Martha, and then Mike, and then Rich.
So there are, oh, this is, I'm getting the feedback too.
Hmm.
Which I wasn't before. All right, I'll try. So there are issues here to try to clarify and make simpler the language, make it clear to sort of to explain what we have been trying to do. This one is one of those content issues that changes. It's a policy change as opposed to like clarifying.
Yes.
So I feel that it really is actually the wrong idea to elect the vice chair when there's no clarity, no settling of the chair role. I think the chair is preeminent, and who is selected chair can absolutely affect who's a candidate for vice chair, as well as how anybody might choose to vote for vice chair. So I feel strongly that this would be a mistake to change that. I agree with clarifying the language, but I don't think, I think the idea of electing the chair first is very important.
Okay, thank you. I think that this is going to be one of those things that like Martha said, it's a policy thing and people disagree. So I think we're going to have to pull this one out as well as something that everyone's going to need to discuss, and we may, need to vote on this specifically separately. Mike?
I just want to say I don't really know what the big deal. It's not like this is ever going to happen. I mean, what would the odds be?
And the odds been happening again.
Jeez. I like the not making appointments. I thought that was a really good addition to it. Well, I like clarity. Hey, that presents some clarity. My question is, what if the temporary chair has served 30 days, and then we're saying, okay, you can only serve 30 days. What happens after that?
Well, I think that falls under the next couple of paragraphs, where that's when the county clerk steps in and appoints someone. So
it's the same as it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just clarifying the deadline for the temporary chair, and that the county clerk would step in at that point. So Rich, I think, was next, and then Mike Lane.
Yeah, following up on Mike's comment, the idea that the county clerk would make an appointment will never happen. Anyway, I like the clarity of ordering the elections. I would support that. Obviously, I participated in adding this language. It just makes sense to me that you resolve the chair question before you go to vice chair. And certainly if we were stuck with a temporary chair who is incapacitated in some way, the legislature could just vote for somebody else to be the temporary chair. So I don't see a problem. Thanks.
Okay, Mike Lane.
I just wanted to say I agree with Henry's point, and I do think you should go ahead and elect the vice chair. When we just went through this situation, some were arguing, well, maybe the person who doesn't get elected chair might want to be the vice chair. Well, I think the people ought to declare, and we ought to know where we are. I suppose the vice chair could always resign, even if it was only elected for a week, and then run for chair again. So I'm in agreement with Henry.
Okay, great. Thank you all. So again, this will be one that I'm putting a star next to, that I think probably the best thing to do is when we'll come back with the whole thing again at the next meeting, and the committee can vote on that, which will then go to the full legislature. Okay, so going on with that paragraph, at the end of that paragraph, the chair and vice chair shall serve until the subsequent organizational meeting or until a successor is elected. And Dan and I talked about this, I think, and I know you put a note in there, Martha, but I think the reason that we, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, the reason that we kept in or until a successor is elected is because there could be a situation where the chair is, you know, dies or resigns or is removed. And so there has to be a provision to allow for another election. So that's why we left it in. So Mike Sigler and Martha.
Sorry, my hand was raised from before, so I got to clear it, take it down. Sorry.
Okay, Martha, then Rich.
So this paragraph is about the organizational meeting. Later on, you have, what do you do if there's a vacancy? If the chair, you know, if the chair dies or is removed. So I think it confuses things here.
Okay.
You know, because when you've got, you're sending the chair and vice chair shall serve until the subsequent organizational meeting, then you know all the things that happen. When you say, or until a successor is elected, as in my note, it says like, who's the successor, the temporary chair? Is it the chair or is it, I think it actually adds confusion rather than helping.
Okay, Henry?
What happens if this is at the organizational meeting that the chair or vice chair are not reelected?
No, well,
Yeah, I don't think it's talking, I mean, the chair
Because
and vice chair shall serve until the next, like, I
Right,
think part,
but if they are serving in the old legislature and not serving in the new legislature, then how does that work?
oh, you mean like for that time period in between?
Well, you say that until a successor is elected, but they would be off the legislature by then.
Right, we talked about this, Dan, didn't we? We talked about something related to this.
Yeah,
Yes.
our other solution was to use the succession list from the past, but it is a valid point that there could be a gap, as is under the current rules as well. The current rules doesn't speak to that situation.
So should we maybe address the situation?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say like, right, we had talked about it in relation to the vice chair, but I think using that successor list would be completely valid in this case as well. Yeah, because there could be a time when the chair is done on December 30th,
Right.
but then the new person isn't elected until January 6th or whatever. So I guess my suggestion would be either the vice chair serves next in that short period, and then the successor list. But there might be other opinions. Rich and then Martha.
Yeah, I think we do have some ambiguity that got introduced here. What if in that sentence we said, except in the case of death, resignation, or removal, the chair and vice chair shall serve until the subsequent organizational meeting?
I think that could work, but it still doesn't address that gap that Henry's talking about.
Yeah, if the chair does not get reelected.
Dan?
I think there is actually a provision, now that I think of it, is if the chair is not available, the vice chair acts as chair. Now, if neither of them are reelected, I don't know, that's not covered.
Right.
I guess the
Martha?
successor list is the, sorry.
Yeah, I think
the successor list is the real answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the successor list is based on seniority?
No.
Well, we vote on that each year. It's based, we
Right.
voted on it a couple months ago, and I think it's sometimes seniority, it's sometimes who's who's been on the longest or who, I don't know. I can't even remember who it is at this point, but yeah. Martha, did you have something else on this?
Yeah, I think sometimes short sentences are much clearer. So I think if you try to get all this in one sentence, it'll just confuse things. So I think the chair and vice chair shall serve until the subsequent organizational meeting, period. In the instance that, at the beginning of a new legislature term, either or both of them is not still on the legislature, you go to the succession list or something like that. So, somebody may not run again. So that's a good question about filling that gap. But I think it deserves its own sentence.
Sure, and we do have that language from the other paragraph, so we could transpose that and work out that language as well. Okay, putting a star by it. So the next paragraph I moved down, so that comes later. So then we're going to the paragraph that says, in the case of a vacancy by death, resignation, or removal. So everyone following along? Okay, Dan, you're next, but just to say that I think what Rich and Dan and I kind of tried to do was separate out if there's a difference between this kind of vacancy or the vacancy of the failure of the legislature to elect a chair. And it seems like there was still some questions up in the air. So so let's just, before your comments, Dan, let's just take that first sentence. There's some basic edits. Anyone have any problem with the basic language edits?
Oh, what's the definition of removal?
Right. Well, that's not one of the basic edits.
There's a question mark next to it.
Yes, there is a question mark, and it is not, again, in what I read in the rules, it's not defined what a removal is. I don't know if Jonathan, if that's in the charter, or if that's something, that's another question we need to define. Do we need to define that? I don't know.
I don't believe there's anything in the charter about removal. I believe somebody could be removed by the governor for, I'm not positive, it doesn't happen with legislators, but it happens sometimes with sheriffs and stuff like that. It's never happened that I know of, but I think you can be removed for under various circumstances, but it's not in our charter as far as I know.
Do you feel like, Jonathan, that's something that we need to clarify as a legislature?
When somebody can be removed? It's a complicated issue because people are elected. And, the issue of the power of the body to remove somebody who's elected, you probably don't have it under law, period, no matter what they do. But under certain law, under certain provisions, I believe somebody could be removed, typically by the governor. But I'm honestly not sure what they are. It's come up a couple of times, not with respect to a legislator. But I don't believe there's any circumstances where the legislature removes a legislator.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but.
Okay, Henry, Martha,
So-
and Mike.
So if the chair embezzled money and it was proven that they got convicted by a felony, that would not be grounds for removal?
Well, it might be grounds for removal, but I don't know that the legislature is the body that removes the person. I mean, that I'd have to look into, but I think not. I mean, there are certain things like, for a police officer, for example, under law, they would no longer be qualified to serve as a police officer. There's no such law for a county legislator. And I'd have to check. I think they'd have to be removed by the governor or something like that. But I'll check that.
Dan, were you next? I've lost track.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
First, I just want to say, despite all the things I may have said about Governor Cuomo, I think he's doing a great job. There's no reason I could think of why he'd need to remove me. I just want it
Good.
on the record. Well, the question marks were mine, were part, at least one of those question marks are mine. There are two question marks in there. And my question, and obviously the removal question is interesting, but more, I was also like, are those the only categories where somebody could be vacant? And are we limiting the rule when we put those in there? That was why I brought up the question about those three words. And I remember Amanda said, well, how else could there be a vacancy? So I've been trying to think of them. I think there are some other possibilities. For instance, if you moved out of the district, you have vacated your seat as far as I would understand. If it turned out you were not eligible for the office in the first place, I think you're probably at that moment not a legislator. There are probably some other things too. So the reason I'm bringing it up is I just wanted to make sure that by limiting it to those three words that are in that parentheses, that we're not making a mistake when someone says, well, that person, it's not vacant because of those three things, it's vacant because of something else, therefore the rule doesn't apply. That's why I raised the question. I'm not exactly sure how to resolve it.
Right. And this was say the incapacitated.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to Martha and then Mike.
Yeah, I think Dan, in that instance, I think if you just said, for example, by death, resignation, or removal, then you've identified some things, but you kind of have removed that limitation. And I happen to think, as I wrote in my email, if you have removal in there, you should probably at least have a sentence somewhere that says what are the conditions or who could do it or whatever. But you know, it just, so that's what I think.
Okay, Mike, Lane.
Well, there's the removal from office, which Jonathan was speaking to, and he's right. I think only the governor could do that, or the voters. But there's also the chair could be removed by a vote of 8 legislators who are no longer happy with the chair. And I think that needs to be thought of as a removal as well. And if, or you might, if you want to craft something, maybe you're going to make it a supermajority to change the chair, maybe a 2/3 vote, for example. But I think that just because you get elected at the beginning doesn't mean you can't be changed, just like the chair has the right to change committees anytime during the year.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's a good point. Like, this is not clarifying what you're being removed from. I mean, I think it's saying you'd be removed from being the chair of the legislature, but I guess if you're removed from the legislature, then you're gone anyway. Dan?
I don't think what Mike said is correct. I think you cannot be removed as chair by the rules. Once you're elected chair, there are no more elections that year. Isn't that what the rules say?
Yeah, I think
Well,
so.
you know, the eight members of the legislature make the rules, and so they could change the rules and remove a chair.
Just that you'd have to change the charter for that, which of course you have the power to do. I think you should read over. I don't know that there's anything inconsistent here, but there's a section on the organizational meeting in the charter. So I don't know that there's anything inconsistent here at all, but just want to make sure that you guys know that and read it before you adopt the rules.
What's the section in the charter?
I just had it. It's in the beginning. It's, I mean, the charter begins, it's like Article 2 of the charter is the Tompkins County Legislature, and it breaks down what the legislature consists of, what the rules are, what the power of the chair is, the power of the vice chair, the power of the legislature. I think it starts out with a statement of purpose, and it has at the very front the organizational meeting. So it's all in the section, which is actually the first group in the charter is the legislature.
Great, thank you. So So it sounds like there's a lot of questions about
Amanda,
removal and what that means. And again, I think this might be something that we need to either decide we're gonna add something or add a separate paragraph of what exactly removal means, because there's a lot of questions. Yes, Martha.
yeah, my hand was up again, not still. Yeah, I think certainly Mike's formulation is not impossible, but it's, I think, not anybody's common understanding as of current, conventions or rules, or whatever. So if that is something this committee would propose, that surely should be kind of spelled out.
Yep, that's what we're talking about. Rich?
Yeah, I propose we take this back to our mini committee. Let's
Yep.
talk some about it.
Great. Okay. So moving on, we added a sentence in that paragraph, the clerk, or added it from somewhere. The clerk will set the meeting date for the election for the vacancy, which may be an additional meeting or the next regularly scheduled legislature meeting. And Dan and I talked about this quite a bit to try to really clarify what it was an adjustment from what was originally there. And we wanted to make sure it was clear that the clerk could set an additional meeting, or it could just be if the next regular legislature meeting was 3 days from then, it could be that meeting as well. Henry and Rich, do you still have your hand up or for this?
Yes. Why doesn't you don't say the vice chair takes over? Before the I think you intended to have the vice chair is removed or dies or whatever. The vice chair takes over, and then you have the clerk notified everything else.
That was,
I guess I was a little hard to hear you, but I think that what you're saying is, why doesn't it say that the vice chair takes over?
Right.
Okay, I guess that's assumed in the role of the vice chair. I guess I can't point to the specific spot, but the role of the vice chair is to step in if the chair is not available. So
I just would like it to clearly say that.
okay. So just a brief sentence saying the vice chair will serve as chair until
The election of a new chair.
okay. Martha?
yeah, that was my point. I had that in my document. I wondered, and then I think, so what should the vice chair set the new meeting, or the clerk, or?
But I think it says the clerk sets the meeting.
Yeah. All right, well, just to make, I agree with articulating specifically right there that the vice chair takes over.
Okay, at the end of that paragraph, Rich had added in a sentence that I moved down to, I think, a couple of paragraphs. So the next paragraph that's all in blue, this was
Amanda, I'm sorry.
what?
Yeah, I had a note. If the vice chair is elected chair to fill that vacancy, is there a new election for a new vice chair? And I don't see that anywhere here. I would assume you'd want to do that, but I don't see that.
Right, a new vice chair.
Also, you have it. So,
Hang on, Henry.
Okay.
Hang on. Right. Okay. So Martha, you're saying if the vice chair steps into the chair position, do we need to elect a new vice chair?
Right. If the vice chair is elected chair, because that person is going to step in temporarily. If that person then runs for chair and is elected
Right,
chair, you don't have a vice chair anymore.
right. So there would need to be another election, and I guess we can figure out if that is dated somewhere else or if we need to add a sentence about that.
Okay,
And
thanks.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you could have a general statement somewhere in there that would take care of that, the vacancy of a vice chair, if there's ever a vacancy of the vice chair that we hold an election, rather than, or you could put it in that section also, but just a general statement.
yep, that's a great idea. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so that next paragraph was our attempt to differentiate between, hang on, Henry, differentiate between the vacancy by death, resignation, or removal and the failure of the legislature to elect a chair. And so we kind of tried to use some similar language, and I'm sure folks have lots to say. Henry and then Annie.
I actually want to go back to the prior paragraphs,
Okay,
which the legislature fails to name a chair, and one's appointed by the clerk. And so the vice chair steps into the role. They try to vote for somebody, they don't. And so then the county clerk names someone who then does an unexpired term. Do we really intend that? Or do we intend for the vice chair to in fact serve in that role?
I think you lost me on that one.
The chair dies, the vice
Okay.
chair is named chair. Then the clerk puts out notification. Okay, now we have to choose the chair. Don't choose a chair. It says 30 days after the vacancy shall occur, county clerk shall appoint a member of the legislature as chair. Will serve the chair as the legislator for the remainder of the unexpired term of the previous chair. Is that what? So basically, you limit the vice chair to basically 30 days or a little bit longer, and that's it. And do we really intend to have a new person take over as chair, or do we intend to have the vice chair take over as chair for a longer period of time?
Right, I think I get it. I think what you're saying is like, if we have a vice chair, why not let that person take over as chair?
Right.
And that's not what this is saying. What this is saying and what we're discussing here is that the vice chair would take over for a short period until a new election. So I don't know. What do people think about that? Is that why we have a vice chair in the event of a death or resignation or removal? Martha and Annie?
I saw Annie.
Thank you. So, yeah, I think that is a big question. I would bring that to the legislature because I think people could feel differently about it. In my mind, it would be that that's the person to take over for the remainder of the term, but people might feel differently.
Okay, thank you. Martha? And then
Yeah,
Rich?
I think the person takes over temporarily, but I would like to see there be an election. But then in the event, I guess, in the event of the failure of the legislature to elect the chair, we have another 7 to 7. I could see the vice chair continuing through the rest of the term, rather than bring the clerk in at that point.
Oh, that's a good idea. That's interesting. Okay, so yeah, so this is all further stuff that needs to be kind of spelled out. Rich?
Yeah, obviously GO is going to weigh in on this first, and then we'll bring it to everybody else to pick apart. So there's no good way to do this, I think. Again, I think this has to come back to the mini committee to then make present another draft to the GO committee. But I believe that the legislature should elect its chair. It should not happen by default. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess maybe with these bigger policy issues, we can put something forward, and then GO will put something forward, and people will make amendments or changes at the full legislature. Everything is going to go to the full legislature. Don't worry. But that's a good point, Henry. So thanks for bringing that up. I don't think we even thought about that. Okay, so what about the next paragraph? In the case of a failure by the legislature to elect the chair at the organizational meeting, the temporary chair shall continue to preside. A revote shall be taken no less than twice at each legislature meeting thereafter until a chair is elected. If no chair is elected within 30 days, the county clerk shall appoint a member of the legislature as chair, who shall serve until the election of a new chair. And just to note that bit right there is in the charter. That's what it says in the charter. So if we wanted to change that, we would have to change the charter. And then this, I think, is where we had the sentence about the vice chair. Until a new vice chair is elected, the previous vice chair shall continue in that role. And that's, again, something that we can, decide if people agree with that or not. And then here's the language about, in the event that the previous vice chair is unable to serve, the succession list shall be used. So we can, again, move that to the other section that we talked about. Okay, other comments on that section? Rich, your hand is up, but I think it's a leftover hand. Okay, and then there's this section about the duties of the vice chair, which, again, it's not spelled out anywhere else in the rules. So that was something I think that our smaller committee will go back to and decide if we need to add that in somewhere or just reference the charter, maybe. There was a question about the vice chair's remuneration. And I think you had a question, Rich, but I think Dan and I thought, because it says thereafter, the vice chair shall receive the salary of the chair. I don't think it's retroactive, unless that's what you want to propose or someone else wants to propose. Okay.
I was just considering clarity.
Okay. Martha.
Yeah, since the temporary chair might serve for 30 days without any remuneration, the vice chair, the clock should start at day 31 to be consistent there.
Okay, any other thoughts on that? All right, moving on. Number 2. Regular meetings. We only had one edit. Towards the end of the paragraph, the Tompkins County Legislature will meet someday in the same week instead of on the following business day. I think we thought that if the following business day was a holiday or something along those lines, it should sometime be in that week. Objections to that? Henry.
Sorry, I want to go back to the last paragraph.
Come on, man, try to keep up.
The last sentence is it's understood the chair's salary will be reduced to that of the county legislature until the chair resumes the duties of chair. If the chair has died or is removed, should they receive the salary?
About until or unless the chair resumes the duties. I mean, it's clear to me, but maybe other people. Annie, is it something on this?
Not exactly,
Okay,
but I have a comment when you get a chance.
sure. All right, well, I'm gonna put until or unless. Okay, anything else on that one? All right, go ahead, Annie.
So I was looking back through at the 30 days and, and then you mentioned 31 days that such and such will happen. So looking at a calendar from this past year, I'm wondering if it would make more sense to put 2 meetings versus 30 days. Because I think what we're meaning by 30 days is 2 meetings. But what if, like, say, in August, we don't have one of our meetings, and then you're leaving 30 days in the middle of nowhere where a meeting could be not till a couple of weeks. So anyway, I think that's the intent, possibly, is 2 meetings.
Okay. Any thoughts on that comment from folks? Martha?
Yeah, I think 30 days is clear. And, there are things to do in between meetings. That's why we had the whole conversation about January 1st to January 8th or January 7th, So I think 30 days is clear.
Yeah, I mean, I think 30 days definitely feels like it makes sense. I think if you're saying number of meetings, then you're kind of opening it up to what if at some point the legislature only meets once a month, or a meeting got snowed out, or I think it might. There's just so many other contingencies, but
Right, but how could we have another election if we can't have a meeting?
yeah, well, we can't if it's a snow day and we don't have a meeting and there's the apocalypse, then we're all gonna have to struggle through somehow. I mean, I don't know. Nobody else is jumping on this one to say yes, let's change it. So if it's something you feel strongly about, we can certainly bring it up again, and we can at the next meeting or with the full legislature.
Thank you.
Okay, Dan.
Anne brings up a good point. 30 days is always, no, not always, almost always more than 2 meetings. Usually the meetings are 14 days apart. 28 days is 2 meetings. 30 days is 2 meetings in 2 days. Including not just this section, but back to that very first section about the clerk making the appointment. I wonder if we should relook at that number, if maybe the number should be 27.
Okay. I mean, I guess from my mind, I don't really see the problem if the calendar falls as such that there would be 3 meetings. I'm not sure what the problem with that is, but maybe.
It's not the calendar. It's always going to be more than 2 meetings. Always 30 days.
Is there something wrong with that?
Well, why 30 days? And how do we get that number? Like, it's a funny number. It's 2 days after
Probably whoever put it in was just like a month. I mean, you could just say a month.
Aren't we paid once a month? We're paid once a month, so that's kind of one paycheck.
I mean, you could say, we could say 1 month instead of 30 days.
Yeah, so the 30 days is in 2 different parts. This one part that we're discussing right now about the vice chair, unless I have fewer opinions about, but I'm thinking back to our very first thing about the clerk waiting 30 days to appoint. I think I want to reconsider that number in my head. We don't have to do it right now.
That's what I meant, 30, wherever we say 30 days.
Okay, so let's put that on the starred list of things for the small committee to reconsider and think through. And if we don't come up with the solution that folks want, there's plenty of time to change it. Okay, all right. Anything else? Going backwards. All right, so regular meetings, seems like that's okay. Dan and I did discuss special meetings quite a bit and what that means, but I guess we didn't come up with any specific edits on that paragraph. Anybody want to say something about special meetings? Martha?
Yeah, right about in the middle, it says, whenever possible, the clerks shall survey legislators. I would rather see whenever possible move to the clerk shall survey legislators as to their availability, and something like whenever possible, the date shall be chosen to maximize attendance. So I think the clerk needs to ask every legislator, about their availability.
Okay. Okay, I mean, that makes sense to me. I think maybe the provision was like, if someone happens to be in Puerto Rico and they're not answering their emails because they have more fun things to do. So, but I don't think just saying the clerk shall survey, I mean, if somebody doesn't answer their phone, then the clerk can't force them to answer their phone. So,
Yeah.
So I think that's fine, just moving the whenever possible. Rich?
I think we should talk about it in the
Okay.
committee. Take it back.
Okay. All right, anything else on the special meeting paragraph? Okay, number 4, place and time of meetings. As you see, we did take out the meeting in the county courthouse because we no longer meet there. And then we had a question, that last line, and shall begin at the hour specified unless a different time and place is provided by a motion for adjournment or by the call of the meeting. And I think Dan and I were kind of like, what does that even mean? So if anyone wants to chime in on what that means, or if we need that, or do we not need that?
Amanda, I think that simply means that there are other ways to schedule the meeting. You can adjourn it to a different location, for example, or you can schedule, the chair could schedule a special meeting, let's say, at a different location.
Okay.
So that's covered by unless otherwise ordered, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. It does feel a bit redundant, or I don't know, confusing. Would anyone be opposed with us taking that out and assuming unless otherwise ordered covers it? Dan?
Just wondering if anyone knows I know what adjournment is. What is the call of the meeting? Is that the same as a vote of the meeting, vote of the legislators?
Well, I think that's what we talked about too.
Yeah.
Is is the call of the meeting when you start the meeting, or you say this is the meeting is going to happen on this time at this date, or
I think it's the latter, Amanda, exactly what you said. It's when the meeting is called. It's through the notice provision, we're having our regular meeting. It's called for the second Tuesday of the month, or we're having a special meeting called by the chair on a Wednesday night, for example.
right.
Okay.
All right, so what should we do with that? What's the group want to do with that sentence? Do we feel like it's sufficiently explained, or do we want to take it out? Or does anyone care? Henry says thumbs down.
Out.
Out. Okay. All right. Well, you will have another chance to comment on that if you want. All right. Moving on to the next page. Added in just to clarify the clerk of the legislature. So we're not thinking it's the county clerk. And then Rich added in the specifics of the public officers law. And I think we should just discuss if we want to put these specifics in here based on a law, which we might then have to change if that law changes, or how people feel about adding these specifics in. Or Rich, if you want to say anything else about your thoughts about adding them in.
I just think it gives us guidance on when we're calling a meeting to properly, or an executive session properly specifying the purpose. It's good
Okay.
government.
Okay, Henry?
Yes, I mean, I wondered why they're included, but also, wasn't there an issue, and Jonathan can address this issue with our former Human Rights Commissioner in terms of calling a meeting appropriately then?
Well, they raised an issue. I don't believe there really was one.
What was the issue that they raised? That we did not use correct language to call the executive session?
I mean, it was sort of that, they didn't like, or they claimed that the language that we used, because it was general and it didn't refer to a specific person, that they were going into executive session to discuss a specific person, and it didn't say that in the, when we went into executive session and just said to discuss a personnel matter. I hardly think any court was going to buy that one. But from now on, we say when it's an individual person to discuss an individual person. But that was their complaint. I mean, it really, I don't think it was a very good one. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Okay. Other thoughts about having this in? Are folks okay with that for now? Seems like it. Okay.
I'm not okay with it for the reason you said, or I think you said, if the law changes, then we're all of a sudden our rules are out of compliance. If it needs to be in there, I'd be okay with the first part where it says, in accord with Article 7, Section 105 of the Public Officers Law, period. Don't list all the reasons.
Okay. I mean, I feel like I could go either way. I think it is good to like spell it out, but then there's the question of if the law does change. I mean, yeah.
Do we?
Rich, go ahead then, Henry.
Good point. I don't feel strongly on it. I don't think the law is going to change. And certainly we'd know if it did. And it's probably people long in advance of us. And it would be their problem, not ours. Ha. But
Nice.
But I would think if you're awake, you're going to see a change in the public officers law about executive session, and we just update it. But
yeah, I mean,
I don't.
I think it would be easy enough to update if people are paying attention and want to update it. So Henry, did you have some other?
Yeah, does the chair in fact read from this list when they go into executive session?
I don't know. I mean, I assume that the chair is aware of the various options for how to go into executive session. And Jonathan?
I mean, the chair almost always talks with me and the county administrator about executive sessions, and most of them come from the county administrator or from me, unless, of course, it's to discuss like us or the direct reports or something like that. But for the most part, they come from administration or from me.
Okay.
And obviously, we're pretty familiar with the reasons the chair almost always asks, well, what reason should I say when we're going into executive session? What shall I say? Because they want to make sure they say the right thing.
Right.
Okay, then I'm probably with Dan then, that we don't probably need the entire list. We can just generally refer to it.
Okay. All right. So again, got some questions. So we'll star this one and make another decision if we're gonna keep that in there or not. Okay, moving on. Rule number 2. We made it to rule number 2. Good job, everyone. Hopefully these ones are a little easier. Quorum. So just a clarifying edit in that second sentence. Couple of clarifying edits of grammar. Martha, you have a question on that first paragraph?
Yeah, in the email I sent, I would add at the end of the, I'm okay with the edits. Add, if a quorum is not present,
Oh yeah, right.
the legislature may not convene. That may sound obvious, but it isn't said anywhere.
Yeah, thank you. I had written that down, but I must have written it somewhere else. Okay, we will add that.
And
Yes, Dan?
can you repeat that? First of all, I think I have a question, but I want to just hear it again.
If a quorum, if a quorum is not present, the legislature may not convene. I mean, it's sort of the definition of quorum, but
Is that a factor or we just can't vote?
I don't think, well, Jonathan,
I mean, what it is that you can't take any actions,
Right.
right? I mean, presumably when you can meet, there are actually some of our advisory committees which say in their bylaws that they can meet but take no action. You know, I don't remember the legislature ever meeting without a quorum, and the wisdom of it is, you know, questionable. I mean, if you, yeah, I mean, essentially, yes, you can meet, but you can't take any action.
Okay. So I don't want to say convene then. I want to say take action, I guess.
Okay, so you would say if a quorum is not present, the legislature may not take action.
I mean, I think that's more accurate.
Okay,
Yeah,
Well,
to say that is an accurate statement of law. That doesn't mean, of course, that you can say we won't convene, but you know, that's just the law.
wait, Jonathan, you just lost.
yeah, what do you mean, Jonathan, by that?
What I'm saying is the law says that, doesn't say you can't convene, it says you can take no action, right? That doesn't mean that as part of your rules, you can't say, well, we won't even convene. It doesn't forbid it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, you know, that that's what the law says, and it, you know, I'm not saying the law doesn't make sense. I'm just saying that the law doesn't mandate that.
Right, but what if what if 5 people get together and they say, we're the legislature, and, you know, they can, you know, it seems to me that you shouldn't, I mean, when the chair calls a meeting to order, you know, you count heads, and if you don't call the meeting to order unless there are at least 8 people there.
That's not accurate. You take attendance and then you've already called the meeting and then you take attendance.
Yeah, but you don't actually call it, you wait until you see 8 people there. I mean, I guess
Well, we've always had 8 people.
seems to me, what?
We've always had 8 people there. I mean, it's
Sure.
the situation really hasn't arisen where we don't.
This whole exercise is to try to put down in language what happens if all these things we never thought would happen. So it feels like it's in a sort of, you're not officially the legislature convening until and unless you have a quorum.
The law doesn't say convene, it says take action.
Okay, Henry has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether there would ever be a situation where there could be a walkout, for example, of legislators. And so I would think that take action is actually the appropriate words in case, you know, or what happens if 8 of us show up someplace at the same time.
Right.
Again,
Right.
no
Right. We're
action
not,
taken.
we're not convened, but we cannot take action.
Right.
Rich?
I think back to the mini committee.
Okay. Well, definitely. Okay. Yes, we are been at this for a while, so let's try to get through the end here. This next paragraph was just kind of trying to clarify what actually the quorum is, and when Dan and I were in chambers, we did ask Kathy for some clarification. So it says not less than a majority of the whole number. It's not who's present. Or actually, Martha, you made an edit on this, which I think made it much more clear. If a quorum is not present, the legislature, oh no, that's what we were just talking about.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, okay. But there was another one. Okay, a majority of the whole number of members is required to perform and exercise any power or authority of the legislature.
Yeah, that not less than was just more complicated than it
Yeah.
needed to be.
Yeah, so shifting that language to be more active language. Does that make sense to folks? Do you want me to read it again?
Please.
Okay. A majority of the whole number of members is required to perform and exercise any power or authority of the legislature, which is essentially what the previous sentence says. Dan?
Yeah, so it's funny because I had read this over again and made another edit for the same purpose. That's a little unclear. What if we just said a quorum is necessary to perform and exercise any power and authority?
Well, I think this is trying to define what a quorum is, though.
The first paragraph defines quorum. And then the second paragraph, I think we are free to use the word quorum then, because that's what we're trying to describe anyway, I think.
Mike Lane, is it on this sentence?
Yes.
Go ahead.
You got to be careful here because we do allow committees to take action, and there are only 5 people on a committee that binds the legislature. So we want to make sure that we're talking about actions by the legislature as a whole that have not been delegated to committees in some way. Maybe Jonathan could talk about that.
Okay, Jonathan, are you there? Talk about committees?
Yeah, no, I mean, Mike is right. I mean, there are, for example, certain powers that are designated to committees, like to approve certain RFPs, et cetera. So I think Mike is just saying it should be clear that when it's acting as in the full power of the legislature, that you need the quorum of 8. And I'm not coming up with words for that. I just understand his point is right.
Okay. Okay, Martha?
You mean sort of to have a notwithstanding, a clause that says something like notwithstanding authorities that are delegated to committees. You need a quorum, you need 8 members or a majority of the members to take action. Is that what you're looking for, Mike?
I just want to make sure it's clear that, for example, there are a lot of bid acceptances that are done in
Right.
committees and don't come to us at the full legislature. And I think we have some, probably years and years ago, had some resolutions that authorize that.
So is the language in a section on committees later on?
There is.
Yeah.
That's
So let's just, I think the point is taken, Mike. Thank you. And let's make sure, we'll look at what the language is for the other sections and make sure that we're representing that here. Dan? No? Okay. So,
Amanda,
yeah.
just as a placeholder. In the first sentence, a majority of the whole number of members shall constitute a quorum. for purposes of meetings of the whole legislature. So we differentiate this quorum from anything we might later determine for for committees.
Great, thank you. Okay, so that last sentence, but a majority of those present, even if less than a majority of the whole, may vote to adjourn a meeting. So that's just clarifying that there is a difference. You can vote to adjourn.
Yeah, I would change the language instead of majority of the whole, say quorum.
Okay, if less than quorum.
May vote to adjourn a meeting.
Okay. Martha, on that?
So who wrote the comment? This is incorrect. We need 8 votes to pass anything.
We wrote that together. It's not the majority of the whole number present. It's the whole number.
Oh, that comment refers to present?
Yes.
I see. Okay. So a majority of those, so the one vote you're saying doesn't need a majority of the legislature is to adjourn.
Yep.
Well, I want to think about that.
Yeah,
All
you
right.
can't adjourn, otherwise you get stuck in meetings.
Stuck in legislative. Yeah.
L.
Yeah. All right, let's get through this end part here. So the next paragraph is this old rule of fining people $50 for each absence. And personally, I think we could just strike the whole thing. Does anyone feel that this is a good rule? Has anyone ever seen it used? Is anyone compelled to force yourself to come to a meeting so you won't get fined $50? Mike, Lane, and then Henry.
Well, I don't think we should strike it. And Jonathan would know better than I, but I'm guessing that this language is in the public officers law or else the county law, and probably taken from that. And most legislatures and government bodies have this authority to compel attendance by their members. Every once in a while you hear about down in Texas, the minority hiding out so they don't have to vote on some action that the majority wants to take. That's never happened to my knowledge here, but I don't think it does any harm to have language in there. Whether you want to take the fine out, that's okay. Either that or increase it to $1,000, let's say, but make it really sting.
Yeah.
But that's why it's there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay to say we have the power to compel attendance. I don't know. Let's see. Henry, you were next, then Martha.
Yes, I think this rule is silly. I think one of the grounds for compulsion, if I show up at the meeting for the first minute and leave, is that okay? Because I've attended, I've gotten, when they do a roll call. So, I mean, I understand the need for it, but I also don't think it's necessary. But we can ask Jonathan whether you think it's necessary.
Jonathan, do you think it's necessary?
No, and I don't really like it. I mean, people are on vacation or whatever. I mean, I think it's unrealistic. I realize that it says that, and it's come up in other places where, like Mike says, in Texas, where people don't show up, but I think as a practical matter, it's kind of an ineffective tool anyway. And it's never happened. No one's ever been ordered to do it and fined $50 or anything in, the close to 30 years I've been here. So, I think it's really a rule which doesn't ever come into play, and it's kind of silly, honestly.
All right. Good advice. Thank you. Martha?
Yeah, and by the way, Oregon did that too. It wasn't just Texas with, hiding out. You'd think this was abstract and theoretical, but it's not. I can think of one legislator who, in my tenure, decided not to attend virtually any meetings. And I remember maybe I was chair at the time, because I remember a conversation with, I think it was probably with Kathy, pointing to this rule. I'm like, really? Okay, so how do I do that? There's no way to enforce this. I would be in favor of taking it out. I mean, if you want to say something that kind of puts a cast to it, like it is the responsibility of legislators to attend every meeting unless whatever, you sort of have that in the next paragraph, but I would certainly take the fine out
Okay.
and the compulsion language. That's not going to work.
Dan, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I agree with Martha. I like that approach, just encouragement. However, if we do leave it in there, I hope we can also put in there that we accept Ithaca hours.
Duly noted. I do think that the next paragraph does sort of say, like, because it's important that you're there, you need to let folks know. And I mean, maybe there could be one other sentence that sort of says something a little more strongly, so the small committee can talk about that. But I think I'm hearing folks want to take that paragraph out. And if that's not the case with the full legislature, people can, we can amend it or put it back in. Mike, is your hand still up, or did you have more? Mike Lane?
No.
No, okay. Okay, Rich?
Oh, I was just going to say, I think we should raise the fine to $163.
$165?
All right, guys, we're getting to the end here, gentlemen and ladies. Okay, so rule 3, just some other clarifying language about the non-appearance of various people. Any comments on that? Questions? Dan?
Yes, since we wrote this and I reread it again, I thought instead of electing a chair pro tem, why don't we use the succession list in this case?
Okay, Henry?
Are there any limits? I mean, in theory, Chair Pro Tem change committee assignments?
No, I think it's,
Well, it says at the meeting, but maybe you would propose at the meeting that you change assignments.
I guess my naive side really hopes that somebody wouldn't do that. And if we need to spell that out, maybe we do, but.
Or whether there's any limitations on their power.
Well, it says they have all the powers and duties of the chair at that meeting. So, Mike Lane and then Martha.
In general, I hope that the small committee and then GO will take a look at the section that's in the charter and in the rules about the county clerk appointing the chair after 30 days. I think we've gone through this. There's no question in my mind that the reason the county chair was tapped was because it was a county-wide elected officer. And yet our county chairs nowadays are basically department heads who really aren't functioning with the legislators, I should say. And when this was brought forward to our county chair to have to make a decision, I think the person was honest and forthright, but probably ill-equipped and didn't have a lot of background in order to make a decision. I think the better way to do it would simply be to elect a temporary chair, and that chair continues. I think it would make it more than just a ceremonial kind of thing, which we have done in the past, and would make it a decision of the legislature to knowing that perhaps it would continue beyond that 1 hour at the legislature organizational meeting.
Mike, I'm getting tired, but I think maybe you're talking about what we were talking about earlier. This is just talking about if the chair doesn't show up, if the vice chair doesn't show up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we were beyond that.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going back. I apologize
Okay.
if I skipped back.
Okay. So, but yes, your point is taken about the previous stuff. So this is just about at Tuesday night's meeting, Leslyn doesn't show up for some reason, Shauna doesn't show up. Who runs the meeting? So this says, right, currently that the legislature shall elect a chair pro tem. Dan's suggesting that instead of that, we use the succession list to just ask that next person to step up and run that meeting. Martha.
Yeah, I like the using the succession list here. We don't ever get to use it, so at least I think it's a good place for it. And then, but to Mike's point, that's a really interesting idea, and I think we should throw that in the hopper. It was a kind of a whiplash moment to say, what, the county clerk has that power? Like, so that of course throws us back to the sort of the beginning of this whole thing, but I think that's an interesting idea and it should be considered.
Definitely noted. All right, let's wrap up. Any last things about this? The small committee will take all of this back. We will have another long, rousing discussion together. We will bring forward another clean copy after all of this. And we're also going to start working on the next section. We've got a lot to do this summer. Thank you all. I'd like to get through our reports, hopefully somewhat quickly. I don't have a committee chair report. I think Lisa is our county administration. Is there any, if she's not asleep, she's not jumping in. Okay. Jonathan, any report from you?
No.
And sorry, I was on the phone. I have no report either. Thanks.
No worries. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for not falling asleep. Drew?
Sorry, let me unmute here. We have no official report, just to let the committee know that Rick will be reporting on the bond sale at the next legislature meeting and sales tax at the ledge meeting after that. So we're keeping an eye on all those finances.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I guess one question, there was also the ongoing discussion of the hotels paying room tax. Is there any update now, or will he be updating us next week?
I know we've talked to a number of them and we've gotten some returns back that were zero, but I'll make sure he has an update for the ledge on Tuesday. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. I don't see Dominic here unless he's on someone else's line. Any committee members have anything they want to share? Dan.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to add something to the list of what this committee may look at later this year, which is ethics. Ethics does fall under the purview of the Government Operations Committee. It's been about 8 years since the county passed its ethics law, so I'm wondering if maybe it's a good time to review it. I'm not sure if we have an ethics policy and an ethics law. That's something I don't actually know. So if we do have a policy, then we should maybe take a look at that as well. I'm bringing this up because in this most recent election, I do believe there was a clear violation of the ethics law. And I think at the very least, we need to go through it so we can, A, review and see if anything needs change, and B, also just to educate the members, because as I said, it's been 8 years since we passed it. And then also, I'll just mention it now because it's part of why I'm asking this. Also in this most recent election, we had an endorsement of a candidate who was on the county legislature in their capacity as head of an organization that receives money from the county legislature. And so those are my motivations for saying we need to review the ethics law. Thanks.
Great, thank you for bringing that up, Dan. 1 second, Henry. I was actually not gonna say all that, but I was thinking about the ethics board, which is also has been brought to my attention. And yeah, Rich, I got you too. And just, you know, in my time, I've never really heard much about the board. I'd love to have Rich at some point, not right now, you know, give us updates and, you know, a little bit more clarity on the board and what they do. So I think certainly adding, you know, the discussion or a review of the policy is a great idea. And we will add that to the long list of policies. But I guess we can sort of figure out how to fit that in, or what other, yeah. Okay, Henry.
Yes, I'd also like to jump on the ethics issue. I had a constituent of mine who said, and I told her that Rich John was chair of the ethics board, and she's gonna be writing us about the ethical violations or alleged ethical violations that not only occurred this election, but occurred in prior elections. She asked whether we had any ethics, ethics education. I said there was something at NISAC's conference when we first came, but then that was it. And
Yeah.
so she's going to be writing you, Rich, just letting you know about it. I'd also want to say that I heard today that the census process was for Cornell was changed or something, and that they're going to be able to count from the directories the grad students. So they said that they said it's a very positive move, and they're going to hopefully be able to count all the people who have not turned things. But I assume you'll find out more about it on Monday on the Complete Census Committee.
I haven't heard anything on that, Henry. You may be right. I just haven't heard.
Yeah, Kate Supron talked about it this morning at the Cornell outreach meeting, and they asked about a census thing, and she said that they've changed the policy regarding counting students, and so she was very happy about it.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that update. Maybe she can tell us more on Monday, Mike.
It possibly could be about the fact that they felt restricted by the federal laws about what information they could release,
Right.
even to the census. That's what they've told us in the past. So, but I'm hoping it's good news. Thanks, Henry.
Rich?
Yeah, I was on that call this morning, and it sounded like there was some involvement of the landlords, which might be really productive if they can become involved in the process, because obviously they know who their tenants have been. Dan, I just wanted to let you know we are in the process of getting an ethics board meeting scheduled. In the past, our work has only entailed reviewing the financial disclosure reports that Jonathan reports to us about. But I have heard that we are going to receive some ethics complaints, and so we'll have to address them. But this will be something the ethics board has not done in some time.
Great. I mean, Dan, maybe we can talk a little bit more about what you envision and how we can, you know, what we need to bring forward to this committee, whether it's discussion or revision of a policy or whatever. Okay. Anything else? Mike Lane?
Just I wanted to say how nice it is to see Dan Klein in front of Daniel Tompkins.
Dan's.
Gentlemen of Geo. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We're exactly at 3:45. So
Hey, that
good
was a
job.
crisp meeting.
That was a crisp meeting. I can't wait till the next one.
It was a good meeting.
Yeah. Thanks for all the comments, and thank you, staff folks who are here and listening to us. So thank you.
Have a great holiday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Happy 4th, folks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
Remember, fireworks are illegal in New York.